Hello, everyone. Welcome to America's Job Exchange's presentation of Harnessing the Power of Veterans, How to Attract and Hire Best Fit Candidates. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, I have a few quick notes. We will hold questions until the end of the presentation, but feel free to submit your questions at any time during the event. We will get to as many answers as time allows, and if we don't get to your question today, you will receive a response via email. One question we get a lot is, will a link to the slides be available? Yes, we will be sending you an email after this presentation with a link to the slides and a link to the copy of the recording. So please rest assured you will be able to revisit this material. Finally, after this event, a short survey will pop up. Please tell us what you thought of today's presentation. Your input helps us shape our programming, so please let us know. And now let's move on to today's fantastic speaker. I am pleased to introduce Jason Medley. He's the head of talent strategy for Shift.org. Shift.org is a career-changed company for transitioning veterans. Jason manages partnerships, talent development, and talent operations at Shift. Helping companies become better at attracting, hiring, and engaging non-traditional talent, Jason has made it his personal mission to help open more doors for the more than 250,000 military members transitioning out of the service every year. Jason, thanks so much for being here, and I'll turn the presentation over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Lauren, and hopefully everyone can hear me really clearly today. I am super excited to be to really have this time with you all. I think the community around hiring veterans is an amazing community. I know it's an amazing challenge, and I consider this an honor that you would allow me to be here today to speak. So thank you so much, America's Job Exchange, and thank you for all of you sort of listening today, and hopefully we can all sort of walk away with one new idea, and maybe even myself, maybe one of you will challenge me with a great question today that I sort of never thought about. But to sort of kick things off, we are going to be talking about harnessing the power of veterans today. I know that the audience that we have here today, I know that I don't have to necessarily prove the value of veterans to you, but I do hope that we're able to learn together, and that we're able to sort of move forward and do some great things. A little bit more about me before we get started, so that you know sort of who you're speaking with. My background and my career has really been in recruiting and the HR space for the past 15 years. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about veterans is because I was an Army brat growing up. I was born abroad in Germany. I don't know if we have any other fellow Army brats out there who grew up in Germany, but I'm sure we do. We are a big group of folks. But I know personally what it's like to see family members sort of struggle with their transition out of the military, and it's something that I'm super passionate about. Additionally, just in the roles that I've had in my career, leading recruiting teams and leading HR functions, I also know how difficult it is for folks with non-traditional backgrounds to break into amazing organizations. I understand that there's real hurdles internally that we have to overcome to create, really clear paths for folks. And so, again, my personal mission is to not only open as many doors as possible, but help organizations be really, really great at doing this. Okay, so as we think about today in our agenda and what we want to cover, I do want to preface it with saying I don't think there's enough time in the world to dive into everything I would love to chat about. I do want to open up at any time. Feel free to reach out to me. You can actually, I'm just going back on the screen here, but you can reach out to me at any time at jason@shift.org. I would love to hear from you after this and really understand if you have any other questions, if you have thoughts, if there's things that you want to offer to me. I would love to sort of hear your insights and your learnings as well. But my hope as we walk away today that we can even build a tighter community around hiring veterans, and that we can sort of learn together. So we may have to have a few more webinars after this to sort of dive in and get a lot more granular into some of these topics. But what we're gonna focus on today, first, I want to make sure that we're all sort of thinking about veterans somewhat in the same way. So making the case for veterans internally. I realize that, again, many of you, I do not have to sell you on the value of veterans, but I do know that there are some barriers internally. And I want to talk about that and make sure that we all understand the value of veterans. From there, I want to jump into skills translation. I know that's a big issue. We're going to dive into a little bit about sourcing, and then I'm really, really excited to talk to you about Shift's fellowship program, which is really dynamic and really interesting in a lot of ways. So let's go. Here we go. So making the case for veterans. The first thing, let's just call it out. Like, hiring veterans ain't easy. So I'm originally from, even though I was born in Germany and I've lived all over, all of my family's from the South, so I've thrown in the ain't there, but seriously, hiring veterans ain't easy. It's not easy at all. I know this, and I wish that there was sort of a magic formula that would overnight make everyone really, really great at doing this well. And the reality is that just doesn't exist. And so hopefully today we can talk about some things that are going to make this a little bit easier on you. But as we think about why this isn't easy, so why is this tough? And I hear a lot of different things. So one is the skills translation. I think many of you in attendance today are recruiters, or you're on HR teams or leading HR functions, and you look at resumes or your intro to veterans, and you honestly are just completely lost about their background and how it sort of translates to any type of role internally for you. It requires a lot of work, and it's really difficult. I hear that a lot, and I completely get that. We also hear from a lot of partners that there's just low veteran pipeline. Like, they actually just don't know where to go to sort of get the type of veteran talent that they're looking for. I mean, they try sourcing, they try different tactics, but they're just not getting any wins. And so we hear that a lot. Within some organizations, there's veteran bias. So some hiring managers are better than others. Some companies are better than others. And there's misinformation about sort of what veterans bring to the table and some of the hurdles that you have to overcome. We often hear that, hey, it's something that we tried before, but we didn't have much success. So we're sort of focusing our efforts on other diversity issues, or prioritizing sort of other diversity groups. We really don't know how to interview them. We hear that a lot. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing, or I'm afraid I don't know how to integrate them into our company. Or a lot of times you also see there's outside of, like, yes, there's this mandated requirement, there's not really a support internally, and that makes my job as a recruiter really tough. So we understand these things. But the reality is, veterans bring amazing skill sets to the table. Every year, like Lauren spoke to at the beginning, 250,000 people are transitioning out of the military every year. And I truly believe that they are invisible for the most part to most organizations' pipelines. But they are incredibly diverse. So when we think about veteran strengths, and today a lot, I just want to throw this out there. When I'm speaking today, I'm really speaking to the average sort of veteran who's walking out of the military. Now, there's always certain cases where certain veterans don't have certain skills, or they sort of excel in other skills. But on average, I'm speaking to the average transitioning military veteran. So when at Shift, we work with lots of partners. I mean, over the past year and a half alone, we've had over, at this point, 13,000 people, transitioning veterans, sort of apply to our program. And so we've gotten to see firsthand a lot of what the strengths that they bring to the table and how those are playing out within organizations. And the things that are really clear to us when we start thinking about veteran strengths and sort of how we sell these to organizations or to hiring managers is that the first thing is that they have strong project and program management. So again, we're not going to camp out here too long, because I think many of you know this, but if not, certainly just screen grab that. Write these down. I know we're going to send the slides out later, but these are great talking points when you're talking about the values that veterans bring to the table. So strong project and program management. They have amazing agility and adaptability. So in the HR functions that I've led in my career, it's very common that HR folks have to say goodbye to talent at times. We have to fire people. And most of the time when we're saying goodbye to talent, it's not because they didn't have mid-market sales experience, or they didn't know a certain technology, or they didn't have prior experience doing the exact thing, more times than not, it's because that talent like doesn't work well cross collaboratively, or maybe they don't take feedback well, or they just have a hard time reaching goals because they're not planning well, or they're just sort of a jerk to work with. And so veterans, outside of sort of how Hollywood many times frames veterans actually bring an amazing skill set and are extremely humble in their approach within business. And so we see that they're extremely purpose-driven and loyal. They're highly organized, focused, and disciplined. This is something that we get feedback on all the time from our partners, is just how dedicated they are to the role and to the mission. They're resilient. I mean, one of my favorite things to watch a new veteran in sort of a new career path do is just really sort of quickly learn how to overcome the obstacles that are thrown in front of them. And I don't know how many of you are sort of from the Bay Area. That's where I'm sitting today. But in a lot of the companies that I've been in, sort of hyper growth technology companies, we deal with sort of engineers who come right out of school making six figures a year, and they sort of, at times, some of them can have a sense of entitlement. They're complaining about the free food that they have every day, and like, you're just not getting that from veterans, right? Okay. So what I really want you to know here, that the true value of veterans really is that hiring veterans is really hiring for diversity. When I think of diversity, I'm not thinking about just what we see with our eyes, though that's certainly part of it. Diversity is really about a mixed background of experiences and stories that you bring to the table, and you're allowed to bring those to the table and add value in a way that really helps level up an organization. And veterans are absolutely diversity hires. So what's really interesting, and I don't know how many of you have sort of dug into some of that diversity of the military, but many of you on this call, you have to hit sort of some diversity metrics and diversity numbers. What's really interesting about the military is that they are incredibly diverse. So when we look at the bulk of folks in the military, so enlisted individuals, 50% or 57% of enlisted females represent a racial minority, which is huge. 43% of enlisted males represent a racial minority. And so one of the things, and we'll talk about shift a little bit later, but one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is within our veteran pipelines, they're extremely diverse. And the same thing can happen for you in your organization as well. So it's not just a diversity of thought, but it can also be a diversity of sort of racial backgrounds as well. Not only are they diverse in just sort of the makeup and who they are and where they come from, but veterans are also uncommonly diverse in that they're taught very early on that it's not about self and it's about the team, and they're around diversity quite a bit. So just moving on really quick, we had a glitch there on the screen. I don't know if the screen's still moving with you guys or not, but I'm on the skills translation screen. Lauren, do you guys see that on your end?
We do, thank you. Okay,
perfect. Mine froze for a second there. So skills translation, I wanna camp out here for a bit. When we talk about skills translation, I think this is probably the number one thing that organizations struggle with. And I completely get it. It's a difficult task. There are words and phrases on resumes that folks don't understand. I think that we're sort of dealing with two different groups. We're dealing with recruiters and hiring managers who don't always know how to sort of speak the language of the military, and we have veterans or transitioning veterans who don't sort of know how to tell their story in a way that translates. And so you sort of get two groups of people who are amazing, but they don't know how to talk to each other. And that's a really big problem. What I do want to call out though, and I want to be really clear. And so if you were coming today and you were hoping that I was going to sort of direct you to an amazing algorithm or an amazing skills translator that's going to do all the work for you, I hate to disappoint you. Most of you, if you've been in the veteran hiring space at all, you've come across skills translators. in my experience, they're not very good. They sort of paint a picture that's very generalized and not necessarily true, and it can at times really take you in the wrong direction. So you will see on some job sites, on some career sites, where they've sort of built a skills translator based on success that they've had with people with certain military codes, and that's okay. But what we're still not seeing that it's adding the type of value that we really want to see. It's not a clear predictor or indicator that they're going to be successful in their role, and so what I want you to sort of know from this is I'm really hoping I'm not disappointing you today, but this is something that takes work. I've got some solutions at the end. I've got some thoughts around this, but skills translation, to get good at it, it takes time. It takes time and practice, understanding veteran stories, really digging in, and you get better over time. I think there's some tips and tricks that can be super helpful that we'll talk about, but it's if you've been relying on skills translators, I think that a lot of you in veterans will tell you that they're sort of a joke, that they're not, they don't really speak to the skills that they bring to the table. And so I just want a little bit of caution around those, but there's a lot more to it than just those skills translators. So the way I like to start thinking about this first is, first it helps to sort of start, I want to give you some tips and some thoughts on sort of how to narrow down your search so that you're getting the best bang for your buck. So essentially, you're not like starting from scratch and you're just looking at any and every veteran and you're thinking about them across any role in your organization, but that you start to understand like how veterans are thinking, what veterans want, what veterans need, what they need to excel in, and then how we can start to sort of translate that into roles and functions within your organization that have the highest likelihood for success. So the first thing I always like to chat with partners about is really understanding the mind frame of veterans at this sort of stage. So and the stage that I'm really focusing on today is transitioning veterans. I truly believe that that if we can capture veterans right when they're transitioning in their final months of active duty service or right when they leave, like that is the prime moment where they can add a lot of value. They're super excited. They haven't been worn down by crazy recruiting cycles, and a lot of what's on their mind and what they've done in the military is sort of fresh. So transitioning veterans they are ready to learn and grow. I see this so much strongly with this talent group than I do with almost any other sort of talent group or talent pool. In some ways, they sort of feel left behind, like they've chosen to serve their country and they've definitely gained some skills, but sometimes they're also a little bit unsure. They feel like they've been left behind and they have a lot to prove and they want to get in and work really, really hard. They're extremely excited and ready to be loyal to their next mission. I mean, this is the thing that impresses me the most day in and day out, how loyal they are to organizations that take a chance on them and that sort of step out and do good by them. One of my favorite questions to ask groups like this a lot of times when they're thinking about hiring veterans is for you to think back in your career and for you to think about a time that someone took a chance on you. If many of you are people managers, at some point, someone had to take a chance on you being a people manager. And if you start thinking about what was the confidence that you had that made you sort of take that leap and accept that role, what was the confidence that a hiring manager had in you to sort of do that? And so veterans are very much sort of the same way. And they aren't expecting everything to be given to them. This is a really, this is something that comes up a lot. So one of the things we hear from partners is that they sort of think of veterans as what they see in Hollywood, which I sort of mentioned to earlier, but it's not really true. In fact, veterans are really taught to be extremely humble and that everyone else sort of comes before them. And so this can actually be a challenge in the interviewing process, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Covering the background of veterans really quick. And this is a great thing to think about when you're sort of thinking about sourcing veterans, when you're thinking about skills translations, and you're thinking about where they best fit in the organization. So veterans are extremely agile and resilient in that on average, most of them are switching jobs every 18 months or so. They are used to sort of like the chaos of change. So if you have an organization that goes through a lot of change or has unpredictability with change, maybe you're a younger organization, maybe you're an older organization that's going through a lot of change, veterans actually do pretty well in that scenario on average. They're also extremely mission focused, which I know you know. They've learned to play well in team dynamics under extreme levels of pressure. This is something that, again, coming from the HR space, when I've had an engineer would come to me and complain about, the brand of chips that they have every day in the snack room, in my mind, I'm sort of laughing because it's like, that is not a real problem. I have 99 problems. That's not a real problem. But, veterans aren't complaining about those things. Veterans are extremely humble and truly understand what real problems are. And many, just to call this out, because I want to do this and it's something to think about, veterans, many of them are technically adept, meaning that they may not be familiar with the exact technology that you're using, but they've been around technologies and they've had to learn them very quickly. And it's something to sort of think about as you're thinking about where they fit within organizations. So we recently did a study at Shift, and we have some numbers here. And essentially, I want to start calling this out because what I'm trying to get us to today is I'm trying to make the idea of skills translation and where to sort of zone in on and how to qualify and select talent. I want to make that as easy as possible on you. And in order to do that, it's really healthy for you to understand what veterans want, what they need, and what they're asking for. So we recently sent out a survey to over 9,000 veterans here at Shift that are in our own pipeline. We really wanted to get some healthy information from them. And one of the things that I wanted to call out was that, I don't know where all of your organizations sit, but one of our highest requested locations, is no surprise, is Texas, specifically Dallas. Veterans want to go places where cost of living is a little bit more affordable outside of like San Francisco or New York. So when we look at sort of the major cities across the U.S., Dallas, Washington, D.C., and Seattle they always come in at the top. So as you're thinking about sort of where talent can fit within your organization, think about locations where veterans actually want to be and are likely to really show strong interest in going. So we also did something where we had them sort of understand their own self-identified skill sets. And I pulled some out to show you today because these are actual skill sets that we actually find with a lot of our partners are actually true. And so I wanted to call these out to you today. 81% of the folks who took our survey said that they bring to the table they're extremely calm under pressure. And I think that's really, really true. And it's a huge asset to companies. They have strong written and verbal communication. They are strong organization and attention to detail. I mean, one of my favorite stories of a candidate that we placed in an organization, it's sort of a high growth tech company here in San Francisco. We placed a guy a year and a half ago into a recruiting operations role. Since then, he's had 4 promotions, and today he is a chief of staff to the C-level on their executive team. And really what his real job is, whenever there is any issues happening on a team or a team is underperforming, they bring him into triage. And that comes out of the fact that he has such strong organization skills, such strong attention to details, an amazing project manager, and knows how to work very closely with people. We see strong customer success skills. And this is something that a lot of people in the civilian world don't think about. They don't think that people in military have to work with other individuals or other groups. They have to work with government contractors. They have to work with other countries. And many of them bring strong customer sort of success skills to the table. Another thing that I wanted to call out that I just thought was really interesting is that is what the sort of salary requirements are of folks leaving the military. I think this is super healthy to understand, especially before you can really even start thinking about, hey, is this person right for this role or that role? Like where are they with this? And honestly, some of this data surprised me. Most folks are really between sort of the 50K and 80K a year annually. Now you have a mix of sort of officers and enlisted folks within this. Some of the more senior officers you'll see will be sort of on the higher end, sort of north of 100. But these are sort of the ranges that we're talking about. The bulk really sort of between 50 and 80K. And really when you sort of step back and look at this, they're all over the place, but the bulk is really between 50 and 80K. And so when you think about roles in your organizations and where they can fit, this is where you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. So what I want to help you think through today is really being strategic about where you place veterans in your organization. So a lot of times when we go in and we meet with potential new partners, they tell me, they're like, Jason, I'm struggling. Like, we're trying to interview veterans for every role here, and it's just exhausting. Like, I don't understand what's on their resume, or they're not interviewing really well. And so I start to dig in. I understand what roles they're considering veterans for, and they're considering them for extremely niche roles, or roles that like very few veterans in the military actually have skill sets around that, and they're making it really, really hard on themselves. And so what I want to help you understand is like, how can you make hiring a little bit easier by being a little bit more focused and strategic about how you do this thing and how you move forward. So the first thing that we see, and I don't know how many of you are seeing this as well within your own organization. If you are, I imagine it's pretty similar if you're successful at hiring veterans. But where we see the most success, and when I say success, I mean folks who go in, ramp up extremely quickly, and are being promoted very quickly, and feel like that they are thriving, and are giving us that feedback that they're thriving, and hiring managers are giving us amazing feedback. Where we feel like people, where the sort of average veteran coming out of the military, where they functions they thrive in, we see a lot within project management roles. And project management looks very different across different industries and different organizations, but roles that have strong project management skills, veterans excel in. They are taught from day one about project management, and they do very well in that space. Another area, again, customer support. So we actually we're launching we're actually launching right now with DocuSign up in Seattle to help really meet some of their customer support demands, because veterans are really great there. Anything within operations, and when I say operations, again, that's a word that means different things, but there's logistical operations, which many veterans have a lot of experience doing, and we'll give some examples of this in a few minutes. But then we also have sort of more of the business operations. So there's a lot of veterans out there who are quite adept at like data analytics. And so that's a place where we get a strong sort of contingent group focused on that. Then sales. So actually what's really interesting, and I'll be honest, I've been surprised by the sales aspect. The bulk of our roles today are actually landing in sales or account management roles, because the mission is so clear, and the more clear the mission is, the more set up for success veterans are. And so, and actually in the survey that we recently did, business development was the number one requested skill that they wanted to sort of obtain in their new role. It was the number one asked for skill outside of cybersecurity, which was really, really interesting. So thinking about functions. So we just talked about functions. So again, just going back, anything in project management, customer support, operations, sales is a really good place to focus your veteran hiring initiatives on. Of course, you can think outside the box on that, and there's other teams where they can thrive. But if you want the best bang for your buck, and if you want to move quickly, these are the functions to really think about. In terms of team consideration, so a lot of times some organizations are really dynamic and really amazing at this, and others aren't. And so definitely want to sort of chat through this just for a couple minutes here. There's the idea of evergreen roles. So where we find that organizations do well when they bring in veterans are with teams where there's people doing the exact same role that you're hiring them for. So people essentially that they can learn from, and quite a few people. So that's one reason like sales or account management, for example, usually does pretty well, because you're Organizations are constantly hiring for those roles. There's people who have been doing it for a while. There's usually, we can launch cohorts of veterans and they can learn really quickly. So one of the places I always start with companies, I'm like, where are your evergreen roles? Where are you constantly hiring for? That's gonna eliminate a barrier right away. Then of course, I think this is pretty obvious, but thinking about where your strongest hiring managers are. So really, like, where are your strongest people managers? When we think about the mindset of veterans, everything can seem new in many ways. In some ways it's not, but it's almost a whole new world. And the success is really limited by how powerful the manager is in sort of understanding non-traditional talent and what they bring to the table and where they need to learn and where they need to grow. And so that's an area, if you ever want to chat about that, if you're struggling with like getting hiring managers bought in, or how can we help assist them and just being great managers and onboarding this talent, I'd welcome an opportunity to have a one-on-one chat with you, because it's something I'm extremely passionate about, and we could probably do a whole nother webinar on that. Think about veterans are sort of like any other diversity group. They sort of want to be able to look around and look up and see people like them. So if you are lucky enough, and most of you probably do, have veterans in your organization, think about where veterans are already thriving, or where there's already exposure to veterans, so that they can have mentors within their organizations and that they can quickly sort of ramp up. Again, and the other piece is location. If you are an organization and you're a multinational organization, you have offices all over the U.S., think strategically about where you're really trying to source this talent. If you can get outside of sort of the larger, more expensive areas, if you can focus at all, if you have offices again in Texas, DC, Washington State, like, you're going to do really, really well in this space. Okay, so as we sort of advance through these slides, I want to sort of start to step into sort of screening and interviewing this type of talent. So I do want to call out the idea of traditional talent versus non-traditional talent, and I know that a lot of you are familiar with this, and some of you may not have thought about it this way, but for example, in the world that I live in, just because I'm in a heavy tech world out here in San Francisco, if I see a resume and I see that there's a back-end engineer from LinkedIn, for example, I have a pretty good idea what they do day to day. Like, I may not know the specific projects they're working on, but I know what that means. We know what that means here. If someone is an account manager for a marketing company, I have a pretty good idea what that means. We all probably have a pretty good grasp. When we talk about non-traditional talent coming from backgrounds that we're not familiar with, it's harder to look at their resume and really understand the context of their experience. That's actually what we're missing, the context of their experience. And I wish that, folks with non-traditional talent were really, really great at writing their resumes, but many aren't. Many of them haven't had training to sort of beef up those resumes. It's just that when 250,000 military veterans are leaving every year, like, the military isn't the best at translating, at transferring and sort of translating that talent themselves. So what we have to start to think about is non-traditional talent. In order to really understand who they are, we have to understand their story and the context of who they are when they come to the table. So in most cases, like, their resume is just not going to tell us that story. And so this only comes from experience of taking time and spending time with non-traditional talent and understanding the context of their story. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So when we're sort of advising clients and partners and recruiters, when they're undergoing the mission of hiring veterans for certain roles or certain functions within the organization, this goes without saying, but I definitely want to make sure that we highlight here. It's incredibly important for every role that you're interviewing for and considering veterans for, that you understand the mission of that role. Being able to speak the language of veterans is crucial, and they want to understand, what is the mission? Where is my value? What am I trying to accomplish here? And if you don't understand that as a recruiter or an HR professional, it's going to make your role really, really difficult. So one of the things that I've done for many years is, for all my kickoff meetings for new roles with hiring managers, the very first question is, what is the mission? What is the mission of this role? And when you come out and you're able to sort of clarify that and speak that language, veterans get really, really excited. It's very clear. They get it. It's language that they understand. Outcomes within a given time frame. So being really clear on what does success look like in this role over a certain amount of time. I know that some organizations are very good at this, some aren't. It's a little more muddy. Some functions are a little bit more muddy. But when you're sort of speaking with veterans and you're also trying to understand if they're right for the role, it's hard for them. It's hard for them to give you examples of how they've done that thing if they don't understand what the outcomes are. So if you're able to tell them, hey, like within 6 months, we're looking to create a new data analytics dashboard, and we're looking to pull data from here and there and all over the organization, and we're looking to do that. They can go, okay, great, totally understand that. This is how I've done that in the past. Also understanding attributes. So this is huge, and I harp on this a lot. But attributes are the things that make people really, really successful. So one of my favorite questions that I ask hiring managers all the time is, hey, when you think about, especially those evergreen roles, when you think about people in this role who are successful, what makes them successful? When they're not successful, what makes them not successful? When you have to say goodbye to them, or when we have to put them on a PIP, like why are we doing that? And you start to understand these attributes and you're able to clearly interview against those attributes. So understanding the attributes are crucial. And then understanding the must-have skills versus skills acquired. So like understanding like, are certain technologies absolutely necessary, or is it really more about the attributes that are necessary, and some of these harder skills can be acquired pretty quickly, like most of us learn somewhere along the way. I put the slide up here. One of the things that I've given you today is, and I think that Lauren, and you can jump in here, I think that we have it attached to this, but it's the interviewing framework. Is that right? Do they have access to that?
That's correct. You'll see that there are 2 handouts posted for today, a PDF version of the interviewing framework, as well as a customizable Word document that you can use to tailor for your organization.
Yep, great. So this is, for example, I wanted to sort of give you a framework of how we, with many of our partners, think about interviewing and screening veteran talent. And really, this is applicable to non-traditional talent across the board. So we don't want to completely change your process or your screening methodologies, but it's just sort of another way to think about getting what you need. This has been extremely valuable to hiring managers. We did this training with WeWork, for example. They're a big partner of ours, and they just sort of rebranded it and made it their own internally, and they're using it across the board, which is really cool. So take some time, look at that. In that document, there's a few things that we sort of dig in on. One is understanding the candidate story. So one of our core values at Shift, and one of the things that we teach our candidates, is stories first. When you're able to understand the context of someone's work within their story, like it opens up so much value into helping you understand those skills translations, right? So just looking at their resume, most veterans aren't going to be amazing resume writers. Some of them have had some help. There's some really horrible resume writers out there. You may be working with partners who are doing this for them, which is great. But most of them aren't great. And you've got to be able to sort of pull their stories out to understand the context. I mean, so we spend a lot of time with veterans helping them tell their story so that when they get in front of recruiters and hiring managers, they're able to literally translate the skills for the recruiter and for the hiring manager really, really clearly. This is, to me, this is the thing that holds veterans back. So we spend a lot of time helping them think through that and do that really, really well. And I remember that I was actually working one-on-one with a candidate that we were working very closely with. Really sort of amazing individual, but he had a hard time sort of like sharing. Like I felt like, okay, I kind of know what you're about, but I don't really know who you are, really the context of some of the things you did. And so as we dug and I pushed and I sort of poked, one of the really interesting things that came out was this individual actually started the Gay Straight Alliance at West Point. And I was completely blown back. We've been working with him for a matter of weeks and he never shared this. And when I started thinking through like everything that he had to overcome to do that, and he walked me through it, it was absolutely amazing. And I was like, listen, like that's amazing adversity. It's amazing sort of, there was even project managed there, but it was huge. And a lot of our partners would love that story. And you're able to sort of make that story applicable to sort of how you engineered something and brought something to life in a very tricky dynamic in a very tricky organization. And so understanding someone's story and the context of their story is huge. But take a look at that framework. Feel free. Again, I've given you a PDF option, an option that you can edit and make your own. If it's of value to you, use it however you want to use it. You can take off the Shift logo, put your logo on there. If you have questions about it, reach out to me. But I hope that can be some use to you for sure. Then I just wanted to call out Meredith here, and I wanted to give you an example of sort of like real life transferable skills in a way that we may not think about them. So I'm a huge fan of Meredith, one, because she's showing a lot of success. And I know that a lot of people here today, you come from companies of all different sizes, have some examples of some branding later on of some larger companies. So I thought that I would use Meredith because she's in a startup in a smaller organization. But Meredith, if you look at her background, so she spent 8 years as a naval flight officer and flight instructor, just really dynamic. Created cohesive relationships amongst multicultural teams, so 15 diverse NATO nations, did really good in her training class, implemented enhancements that were super effective, and she was really just smart and a dynamic leader. So when we look at her transferable skills, we were able to see that, okay, cool. So she was an expert in process improvement and team management, excellent high pressure environments, concise, clear communicator, quick learner, nimble and adaptable. And what she's at today, she's in a sales role. She's literally in a sales role. She reports to the CEO of a startup. She's training all of the account executives that are coming in and the customer success teammates. And she's closing deals that are greater, on average, that are greater than $1 million. And you probably never would have thought, okay, this Navy flight officer is going to be great at sales. But what we did with ID.me is we took the time to understand what are the attributes of successful people in this role. What are those attributes? Then we were able to measure those attributes against our talent in our pipeline. And we were able to ask questions and really drill in. And our hypothesis worked. Like, she's exceptional. And this is sort of how we go about it. So we back into it. We understand the attributes, what makes someone successful, and we measure folks against those attributes. Sourcing, really quick. And I'm going to speed it up a little bit because we're getting short on time, and I definitely want to leave time for questions. So I'm gonna breeze this just a little bit. But again, please feel free to reach out to me. So sourcing, first things first, branding. So you need to talk the talk and walk the walk. For many of you, you're in larger organizations. Your competitors are absolutely speaking directly to veterans with their employer branding. If you're not doing that, like, you've got to start doing that. So on your, and I'm going to show you some good examples of this here in a second, but you'll see this on websites. Speaking the language of veterans, a great example is like the mission. When you're able to speak to the mission, something that they relate to. So understanding what is the language of them, and I'll give you examples here. Help veterans connect the dots to their new career. So remember, like, they don't understand this world as clearly as you do. And when you're able to say, hey, like, I understand the attributes that you have coming from the military. And I now understand the successful attributes that make someone successful in our organization and within certain functions. You have a career here in sales, and we can take care of you. And we're going to give you the training. We're going to scale that. They love to hear that. Leveraging veteran testimonials, and then also not forgetting to also brand your LinkedIn and Glassdoor sites. So Southwest is a company that I think does this really well. They sort of demonstrate that veterans fit in all roles and in all areas of the organization. They even have video. Booz Allen Hamilton, of course, we know, like, they're one of the best in this space, hire tons of veterans, but they really link what they do to the mission. The mission is critical, and they call that out, and they call it out well. They also help people understand, like, why veterans love working here. Like, how do we engage with them? How do we embrace them? Branding is absolutely huge. When you're sourcing on LinkedIn, many of you may know this, but there's a TAPS course in the military that everyone has to take as they're exiting the military. Most of them don't take it until their final, literally, like, few weeks of active duty service. But one of the things that they're taught in that TAPS course is to write transitioning veteran in LinkedIn. And so that's a really great place to start. There's so many tricks in LinkedIn. And again, that's probably another webinar itself, but start there. I think I did a search yesterday, just double checking, and I think there's over 3,100 folks who are transitioning veterans. If you have a LinkedIn recruiter account, you're able to see the open to new opportunities. So veterans are veterans are targeted a lot by fake companies. They're taken advantage of, and they're very I was just reading an article this morning of a company that had a fake site that was taking advantage of veterans and stealing their information. And when folks reach out to them, they're very careful. And so the open to new opportunities, a lot of them are pretty good at being very clear about where they want to be, what they're looking to do. And even if it may not be the right city, but you love their background, selling back to them, like linking the role to what they want to do and calling that out, like doing sourcing really well, just like you would for any other role, is crucial for veterans. And then leverage veterans internally. So referrals, ERGs, testimonials, have them help with sourcing, screening, and interviewing. Listen, there's no one better to sort of screen backgrounds and resumes than veterans themselves. And then there's other talent pools to sort of think through outside of this as well. I'm going to jump on. Mainly what I want to tell you today is this. Listen, it's not easy. I know it's not easy. And honestly, over time, the more you do this, the more you understand attributes, what attributes are successful in your company, and you learn how to sort of suss those attributes out, you'll become a lot better at screening candidates faster, and you'll sort of be able to glean some of these things from the resume. But I do want to tell you that there's a better way, and I'm completely biased here, but the main reason I'm at Shift is because I think Shift is doing something remarkable. So I want to talk to you just for a few minutes about the Shift Military Fellows Program, which is, to me, super game changing. It's not the only thing we do here. We do direct placements as well, but I do want to talk to you about the Shift Military Fellows Program for just a moment. So the VA has basically said that Shift has cracked the code on military transitions. We've literally reinventing the ways that company hire military talent. So one of the things that we do, and we're super proud of, is that we start working with veterans anywhere from 6 months to 2 years before they're ready to transition out of the military. We take them through a talent development process, helping them to tell their story so that when they get in front of folks like you, they are extremely strong and you're not left sort of like in a guessing game. But what we do is we put them into fellowships with partner companies their final 3 months of active duty service. So they're still fully employed by the military. They're spending their final 3 months with you with the goal of full-time conversion at the end of it. Today, on average, we have an 85% offer rate at the end of their conversion, which is really, really awesome, and we're super proud of that. We have a rich, consistent pipeline of diverse candidates. This is something that is very serious for us. So we want to, most of our candidates come from our direct relationships with over 100 military bases globally, including some of the other sort of partnerships and networking that we do as well. Most of it comes directly from our partnerships. We also work very hard to supply a diversity talent pool to all of our partners. We facilitate upfront screening to find you the right candidate. What Shift does really, really well is takes the time to understand what you need, doesn't waste your time, and delivers amazing candidates to you that add value right away. We translating military experience, I know, is like the pain thing that many of you struggle with. And Shift shines at this. We take our candidates through a talent development process. Our team is trained to do this really well, and we deliver candidates and make it super clear the value that they bring, where they can fit into your organization, and how they can add value. And we align that with the roles that you have. Just a quote here from one of our partners, but Publicis Sapient is one of my favorite partners right now. I was just in their New York offices last month, and there was a cohort that we started there a year ago, and they were actually presenting to a new cohort of veterans, and literally one of the guys presenting is now sort of leading their like key Marriott account internally, sitting in the Virginia area. And this is a whole different human being from who he was literally a year and a half ago. I barely even recognized him from all the information that I knew about him. And it was absolutely incredible. Like, he's a completely different human almost, in terms of like, he is an expert in this space. And it's really impressive. So Shift facilitates environments that transform culture. Like, we really shine at helping organizations be really great at onboarding and screening and choosing these individuals. What's really great, and I'm about to end, but what's really great when you take on a fellow, you're not paying them in those first 3 months. So as you're assessing them, you're not paying them a dime because they're still paid their full salary and full military benefits by the military. And this is made so by the Department of Defense's Skill Bridge program, which we're a partner of. So here are some of our veterans who have been successful in different types of roles that they worked in. We're super proud about it. We're placing people all over in organizations. Again, the bulk of roles that we're seeing them in are anything heavy project management, operations, sales, and account management. And then we are, if you are interested in being a partner of Shift or learning more about Shift, please reach out to me. I would love to tell you about more about what we offer, how we're successful, and how that works. We're working all across the U.S. right now with really great brands, and would love to include you in that and just be a resource to you in general. One of the things I'm going to speak with Lauren about a little bit, but I'd love to engage with some of you, maybe even create sort of like a Slack channel that we can all engage in and share some best practices. If that's something that you're interested in, please reach out to me. Great. So I am going to pause there. Sorry for speeding up towards the end really quick, but I saw the time and I didn't. I wanted to make sure that we had time to answer at least a couple of questions. But Lauren, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Jason. We did actually get a few questions that came in. I'll just jump right into them. In higher ed institutions, how do we reach vets with advanced degrees? Jesse wants to know.
Yeah. Great question. So I think one way, I don't know what kind of sourcing you're doing currently with this. I mean, LinkedIn is an option. It's a option. I'm not going to say it's the best option or the worst option, but it is a option. I think in terms of creating partnerships, so a lot of people when they leave the military, they take advantage of their GI Bill right away. So a lot of people, they have different paths. Some feel like they have to go straight and get their degree or an advanced degree, and that's the path they take. So within a lot of universities, they have amazing sort of careers development departments who work very closely with veterans. There's some universities that are doing that a little bit better than others, but that's one place I would start. Also, I would encourage you. So I know that again, there may be different requirements for the role that you're looking for. I think there's also some sort of non-traditional areas of education today. So there's boot camps, there's data science boot camps where a lot of veterans are choosing to go to. There's schools like Lambda School, which is really, really interesting, which is doing some really great things for veterans. Google Lambda School, I think it's really interesting right now. They're in cybersecurity, they're in engineering, they're in data science, and essentially 6 to 9 month boot camp, and veterans are having a lot of success there. So I would encourage you to also look outside of sort of the traditional higher ed. I think a lot of people right now are sort of questioning sort of the value and the ROI of that. But yeah, I think LinkedIn, I think career services departments of universities, and then look at some of the non-traditional outlets as well, and start by Googling Lambda School. I'm just really fascinated by them.
Great. And Jose was wondering about the incidence of veterans with disabilities. It's kind of a two-part question. Do you know the percentage of veterans with disabilities, and do you find that they tend to be more apt to self-identify, as they will certainly self-identify as a military person?
Great question. So my immediate response is I don't know the exact number. And I think disabilities in the military is a wide spectrum, right? Like some people have, they're classified with disability or a certain percentage of disability for many different things. I think that, I think the latter part of the question was, do they identify as a disabled veteran or a veteran in general? Is that the question?
Yes. Would they be more likely to do that, I believe is what Jose's asking.
It's a tough question. I think some of our conversations, we have an amazing talent strategy team and talent development team, and this sort of comes out in people's stories. Some do, like some make it part of their stories, and I think it's really dynamic. But I would say that most of them don't. Most of them, a lot that come through our Shift program would probably be more likely to share some of that. But I think in general, it's something that they feel there's like a slight stigma around it, and they're a little bit cautious with it.
Okay, and we just had one last one. Could you briefly touch on the job centers, the state job centers like Cal Job Center? Suzanne's wondering how do the reps there do at that veteran skill set translation? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna. It may not be the answer you'd like, but I'm gonna give you the best answer. So. I think it's okay. I think it comes down to sort of individuals. Listen, there is no like some of them may throw skills translators at you, and I am just saying be cautious of skills translators. If they've taken the time to understand the context of their stories and they can give you examples of experiences, and I think some individuals and those organizations can. I think that those are the things that I look for. Listen, I wouldn't discount it. I think it's a great outlet, but I think just like any sourcing that you do, make sure that you diversify your sourcing with this. So if you become 100% contingent or dependent on sort of some of those agencies, you may find that one, like, funding is really weak. They don't have sort of the resources to really pull out the talent development piece and help them tell their stories and giving them the tools to be successful. And so you could spend your time sort of like spinning wheels and it just maybe a little bit of a lag time. So I would be careful there, but ask, some of the clarifying questions that I like to ask is, so how do you know these skills are transferable? Like how do you know that? And that can be very different, but that tells you a lot. That's usually what I lead with.
All right. Well, that covered all of our questions, and we are right at the top of the hour. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. A lot of fantastic information. Once again, everyone, we will be sending out a link to the slides. I will try to include the handouts as well, but feel free to download those now if you'd like to. Jason, again, thanks for being here. Thanks to all of you. This concludes our broadcast, and we hope that you will join us for another future presentation. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.